Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at Nextgov and Defense One's Intelligence Summit. I'm James Hanson, Group Publisher of Federal and Technology Markets at GovExec, and I'm excited to introduce our next session, how agencies can utilize AI and ML together with data fabrics. And joining me is Kurt Steege. Kurt is the Chief Technology Officer at ThunderCat, where he brings more than 20 years of IT transformation experience in and outside of public sector, serving as the Chief Enterprise Architect with the FBI, to Chief Information Officer of McAndrews and Forbes. Kurt, welcome.
Nice to be here, James.
To start us off, can you explain the connection between information and artificial intelligence?
Sure. It's a really interesting connection. Without one, you can't have the other, really. You hear so many of the IT professionals these days talk about the amount of data, the 4 Vs, the 5 Vs, all of those kind of things. I think we're up to, actually, I saw one thing recently which has 42 Vs of data out there. And it's just growing all the time. The information business itself is booming. I'd even go so far as to say it's the key product of what we do on a day-to-day basis in the government. Think about it, whether it's a product or a software or something like that, you need information about that product to make it better. You have feedback. You need to test that product in different situations. If you're talking about, some of the defense folks with, working through large military vehicles and planes and things like that. And then, you test that product in different situations, make sure it works the way you want it to do. If you go to the sort of human side of it, you're an agent in the field, myself coming from the FBI background. You need information on your target. That information has been gathered from other sources, analyzed, possibly by some analysts, and then delivered to you in a way that's safe and secure so that you can do your job. Data and information really is the lifeblood of AI. The more information you have, and information about that information like metadata, the better AI and ML models can become. And the better the models become, the more data they bring back into the mix as well. Kind of like the mythological Ouroboros, the snake that kind of eats itself. It just keeps going, going, going.
And how do they, artificial intelligence and machine learning, improve and influence, agency governance models or some of the analysis that you were referring to?
Sure. It's a use case for kind of versus the business side. From a governance and security standpoint, AI, this analysis of information, is really the connective tissue that runs between things, between all the different use cases, right? AI governance is really the thing that validates the work that is being done, making sure that it's not only understandable, but illustrative and ethical and free from bias. So areas to look at when you start to talk there is, because you want to make sure that the information you're getting is not biased in one direction, so that you're getting the result that you want, maybe not necessarily the result that you need. Things to look at there are sources of data, their quality, the security around that data, so that data can't be tampered with, making sure that the process and the data itself is auditable, so that continuing along the security space, and then reflected back through things like time and cost. Use cases around that, which we see where we talk about, data security and very different types of data that are out there. At the VA, they take, where they have, serious compliance issues around health information. They can take that patient data that they have, match the needs of the patient securely, yet still be able to notify when those folks may be able to apply for a medical trial that's specific to their conditions. A lot of the AI work that's being done is kind of reducing that signal to noise ratio when you build it into an overall architecture.
And how do you ensure the constant flow of that information that you were referring to before into the maturation of the analysis and the outcomes over time?
Sure. I guess a fundamental step in any of these kind of things when you're talking about IT transformation is to modernize your infrastructure. Specifically, the AI workloads, data analytics, intelligence, deep learning, they demand pretty extreme performance when you're talking, whether it be on the processing side or on the storage side to get the information there. So things like all flash arrays and stuff like that. More and more organizations are also taking that information and adopting, through some of the different EOs that have been out there on cloud first strategy. So basically driving the need for enterprise grade data services for shared environment, whether it's on premise data centers or in the cloud. And as a result, you need file systems also that can span both of those, internal infrastructure and cloud, providing robust data services, integrated data protection, scalability, and, hit these new levels of performance. But with all of that, you have to deal with the fact that, unorganized data in those spaces provides several threats to government. For one, if, data storage patterns, if you've got things scattered all over the place, when things come into when organizations need to spend countless man hours at retrieving what they already have to fulfill a FOIA request or an archival project, and going through that information and making sure you understand what you have and where it is, although it's inconvenient. I mean, who really wants to go through all the stuff, right? The risks loom bigger and bigger with security, because poor data visibility can lose, you can lose track of sensitive information. Policies, credentials, data leaks have derailed mission objectives and eroded public trust in the past because of those kind of things.
And I guess that's how you would define that data fabric. And so in defining that, what are some misconceptions that you think people have around the use of AI? And, given today's audience, how does that translate specifically to the intelligence community?
But I think that there's a couple of things right here. And one of the kind of interesting general hesitancy that you see, just average person intelligence or whatever with AI and ML, is like many folks, I think, maybe have seen too many science fiction stories, and they hear the words like algorithm and very mathematical sounding things like Bayesian regression neural network and stuff like that, and they're concerned with training a model to take over their job. I guess, in a lot of cases, what folks fail to understand is the idea of this human in the loop, and how working in conjunction with well-curated models can make them more efficient, the people more efficient in their own jobs. As we said before, freeing them from the noise that's out there to focus on the things that matter and to the agencies that they're in. The old ways of working with data and understanding things and searching through specific things, in some cases, a human eye, to find that needle in the haystack. Right. And now we can focus, by using these things, we can focus things much more quickly to not only find that needle, but the eye of that needle to get the most accurate information. And this is kind of true regardless of what you're talking about, whether it's an intelligence agency trying to find things like targets and things like that, or whether you're talking about the folks that are working in the science fields, whether they're developing vaccines, working through weather forecasts and monitoring treaties and things like that. So all of these things kind of work together, and the models are able to be translated across both spaces.
So we've talked about, as we're wrapping up here, I want to leave our audience with some practical advice. You talked about kind of that data fabric. You talked about the need for infrastructure to accelerate that innovation in AI. You've listed a ton of great use cases. What now would you leave our audience in terms of a best practice towards greater AI adoption?
Sure. I think we like to look at things in phases, and it's easy to kind of look at steps and things like that. There's a couple of different areas, and they don't necessarily have to happen in order, but I have them in an order just because I think it does make sense that way. And I guess one of the first things that folks are looking at is the visibility, sort of account for the data that you have, understand what you have, and then establish a management framework around that. Once you work through those things, you need to understand the why. What's the business value of this information? How can what I'm doing here, like we talked earlier about the VA, how can the patient records be really important and work towards getting somebody in a clinical trial? How can information around the wear and tear of a piece in a tank or an airplane or a boat, how can that how can that information translate to the fact that I know it's going to wear this much sooner? I know that, with all the supply chain issues that we have these days, I know I can order that part, maybe 2 months earlier than I really actually need it, so that it's there, because I know, based on the stresses that are occurring within the systems that you're talking about, that it is going to fail, and know that it's going to fail sooner, instead of waiting for it to fail before we have to fix something, right? Try to eliminate data and workflow silos. That's really important. It gets tricky when we start to talk about, classifications and understanding where things have to fit, in the intelligence space. But bringing the information together doesn't necessarily mean that security has to come together. The pieces are still secured independently, but actually being able to relate that information, because again, more data gives us better models, gives us better feedback in the space. Prepare for the future, work with folks out there. And then kind of the last thing is, I think, as more and more of this happens, we need to really shift the culture to a data-based, not database model, but data-based organizations, where they understand really the value of bringing that information together and collaborating on the information together, so that we can share it.
Well, Kirk, I can't thank you enough for your time today. I can't thank you enough for your service. Thank you to ThunderCat for underwriting today's session and being one of our elite underwriters for the day. Our audience, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to stay tuned after the lunch break for more great sessions. Also, please check out the Resource Center if you want more information on how ThunderCat is driving AI and ML together into a data fabric. We have some great resources there. Again, Kurt, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. Great to be here. Look forward to it.